Okay. Hi everyone, this is SmithyQ, SmithyQ.com, and we're back with another video analysis. This one is for friend of the blog, Rao3333. He played against an opponent who was rated over 200 rating points higher than him, and despite that, he played a really good game. He got a very good position. His opponent never really had a chance. Unfortunately, in the end, it came to an endgame, and though the endgame was quite good, we couldn't quite pull it off in the end. So let's take a look. Let's see what he did well, what he can improve on, and if there's anything to learn from the game. And so the opening itself, d4, right, knight f6, c4, c5, then we had knight f3. Which is fine, perfectly normal way to play. Take, take, and now Black plays this interesting move, b6. Might be premature, because we'll see what happens is after knight c3, bishop b7, bishop g5. So far, simple moves, and I think what Black needs to do here is likely get into some type of hedgehog position, so something like e6, d6, and he put his knights and his everything on the second or third rank, similar to a hedgehog or some versions of the hippo. That's probably what Black needs to do. Alternatively, you could try to do e6 and get a fast d5. That's there. But what he does instead is he plays knight e4, which I think is a mistake. Well, I think it's clearly a mistake. After take, 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 here, here, we reach this position. And I just want to back up for a second. So let's just delete these arrows. So if we look, from here to here, we do this a couple times. What's happened is we'll see that Black has simply lost the knight. His knight disappears. And White gains a strong center. e4, f3, and now this bishop is staring at absolutely nothing. And so when I switch back and forth between these three moves, the sixth move, the ninth move, what we're seeing is Black's loss of time. And that makes perfect sense, because again, if we look at this, he moves his knight, so he moves his bishop, then he has to move it right back. Right? We know in the opening we don't want to move our pieces twice. And so Black is now behind development. It's going to take him a long time to castle. I mean, he's got to take at least one, two, at least three moves, right? We only need two. And we've got firm control of the center. Things are good. So this is clearly a mistake from Black, is what I'm saying. This coming in with knight e4. And then he plays f6. Okay, move the bishop back. That's good. e5. Knight f5. And if we just pause for a second, look how nice this knight is, right? It's targeting this pawn, so this bishop can't move. It's also threatening to come into the d6 square with check, almost certainly forcing a capture, and the knight's great. Bishop b4 check. And this is the first, I think, interesting moment in the game. If we look at White, White's got a nice position, nice strong center, firm control over d5, really nice knight. If there's one problem with White's position, it's this bishop. Because White has most of his pawns and all of the center pawns on the light squares, and so this bishop isn't very good. Now, as long as you have both bishops, you're fine. But if you only have this bishop, then you can really feel the restrictions of what the bad bishop feels like. Conversely, if you look at Black, most of his pawns and most of his center pawns are on dark squares. That's his dark square bishop. And if we could find a way to keep his dark square bishop, like if he can trade that, that's obviously good for him. And we don't want that. So in the game, we played bishop d2, and after take, take, we're here. And this is perfectly fine, I think. But I really don't want to get rid of this bishop, because this bishop is so good. It's really controlling this square. I can maybe play f4 later, and just, again, it's my good bishop. If I could keep it, I would. And so I started playing around in my head with this funny move. King f2. Keeping my good bishop, not letting him swap his bad bishop. And notice how, again, the knight is still threatening this pawn. He has to do something with that pawn. And best play is probably something like g6, knight take, and we reach this position. Now, yes, I can't castle anymore, but does that really matter? Is he in any position to attack our king? I don't think so. He's still only has one piece developed. If we have to, again, we can easily move this bishop, move this rook somewhere, move the king back. We're nice and safe. Things are nice. And moreover, his king isn't safe. He can't castle, right? Our queen's stopping it. If he's stuck in the center and we bring our rooks over and we're plastering in, that looks really good. And if he does castle, well, then he has to worry about something like bishop h6 and maybe h4, h5, and there could be potential mating attacks. That's pretty good. And even if there aren't mating attacks, white has a really easy plan here. We can just play b4, we're going to play c5, we're going to open the position up. We have the two bishops, so we're going to open things wide up, especially if his king is still in the center, rooks go in the files. We've got a very good position here. Also, if black is forced to try and exchange queens, then that makes our king even it's placed even better for the coming endgame. So rather than castle all the way, it's closer to the center. So I think king f2 is a really interesting move. And I was really happy when I loaded this up in the computer, and the computer says king f2 is like a pawn and a half better, the best move. It's like, all right, it always feels great when a move like that just is the best move. But anyway, something very similar happened in the game, right? Black was able to castle, and then after g6, we had the knight come in. So again, a very similar position, right? So if you look back, that old potential variation, with all these arrows, and then we look at this, very similar. The difference is we have this knight instead of the bishop. Now, don't get me wrong. This knight is great. It's fantastic. It's just that this bishop feels a little bit worse. That's what it feels like. Queen c7, of course. We want to protect the bishop. No rush to take the bishop, because again, that would actually be worse. This would be a strategic mistake, because now we got rid of his poor bishop, and we're left with the much worse minor piece. He's going to play knight c6, knight d4, and if anything, black has the advantage in this position. So we never want to take. Here's where we make our first inaccuracy, I feel. And this is a very normal move he plays. Rook c1. Makes perfect sense, right? Rook is lining up with the queen, protecting our pawn. Maybe we can play c5 at some point. But that's it. And there's no real actual plan, I feel, with this move, or what we're going to do in the future. And if we look in the game, actually, like 3 moves later, we just move the rook over to d1 anyway. So there's a loss of time involved. When we had the option of simply playing the rook to d1 right away, putting more pressure on the d file, because maybe we could then, if this knight were to move, okay, sorry, something like this, we could win the pawn now. All right. Okay, he gets his knight in, but hey, a pawn's a pawn. That's a possibility. And there's something else. His king, even though he's castled, notice how he has all of his pieces pretty much on the queen side? We can bring our queen over to the king side pretty quickly. This knight's in the center. It can control some squares here on the king side. And we could think about the interesting idea of h4, h5 here. Again, our king is leaving in the center. If we want to, we can move him here, and then this rook could slide all the way over and support the attack over here, the pawn storm. And that would be a really interesting plan. So we had, I think, 2 interesting ideas in the position. Either this h4 attack, or rook d1, or we could combine them. Right? So I think that is better. Instead, we played rook c1. That's fine. Okay, he develops his knight. Knight b5. Rook d1. a6. And so, what do we do here? So in the game, there's some complications here. What happens is we did took, take. Then he moved his rook over to defend his bishop, and then black got into some trouble. Let's start here, actually. Obviously, the most critical move would be what happens if he were to take our knight. Of course, we take back. But now we see the problem is that by opening the A file, his rook could slide all the way in, and we might reach a position sort of like this. Okay, he takes, then our knight moves, and we might think we can win a pawn, but oh, that's not very good. So we have to prevent this rook A1. So we have to waste the tempo. Then that lets black take that, and not too happy with this position, in all honesty. And the computer thinks it's perfectly equal. Black might be better. Let's back up. So what happened there? The problem was that we took, take, and then it was this A takes B5 move. We back up. Now this is hard to see, and honestly, I didn't see it. The computer pointed it out. Is that instead of taking the pawn right away, we could have done an intermezzo. Queen D5 check. And so now what happens is the king moves over. We play knight D6, and now we've got a couple of dual threats. We can potentially take this bishop, and we're also threatening knight F7 check here with potential fork. And again, his king is stuck over here. We can get that H4, H5. Whoops. Yeah, sure, all the way like that. Or we can just castle and keep pressure in the center. Or just win the pawn. All that's great. And so by playing Queen D5 check first, that would help. And notice that going here to G7, wow, I'm really good at this. It doesn't help because now we take with check. He doesn't have time to take our knight. He has to respond to the check first. I really have to learn to disable notifications before I start recording. And so that check gives us a vital tempo. So that's really interesting. And this is one of those golden rules, right? Is always look at potential checks. See what happens. That was tough, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, so Queen D5 would have been the way in. As it was, our opponent didn't play taking the pawn. Instead, he went really, really passive, which is absolutely perfect for us. So he defended. We're able to move our knight in. He has to go even more passive. And now we're going to reach this position, which is, I would say, the second critical position. And so our hero here, he castles. Makes perfect sense. And then the game went on. Take. And we'll come to that. Is there anything better? And because I'm stopping here, because I said it's critical, I guess we know that there is something better. And if we look at this, our rook is great. Our knight is great. Okay, we want to get this rook into the game. This bishop sucks. Right, staring at pawns. How can we get that bishop into the game? What can we do? Isn't this a great diagonal? If we could get the bishop on that diagonal, all of a sudden, we're just absolutely rocking. And if you can realize that, where could I put this bishop? Somewhere on this diagonal, then all of a sudden, this move, C5, it starts jumping out at you in a big way. If he takes the pawn, well, all of a sudden we've got check. Oh, he only has one move. Oh, then the knight comes in, and look at this. Discover check. Check. He can't go back to the corner because that would be mate. Look at that. Beautiful. Our pieces are coordinating. And so he'd be forced to move to the front. Then we can take this pawn. All of a sudden we've won 2 pawns. His pieces are passive. Things look really good. Yes, he is threatening this pawn, but he has to do something with his rook. And we're also threatening this pawn. Things are great. Right? Incredible. And if we back up all the way, C5, if he doesn't take, let's say he plays B5, well then we can slide our bishop back, and now we're threatening to come in like this. The exact same thing. Check. And best play appears to be knight D4. We bring the bishop in. Take. And we're going to reach this position. And there's a key difference here. All right? The key difference, compared to what happens in the game at least, is that instead of having our bad bishop, he's stuck with a crappy bishop that's staring at our wall of pawns, and we have a glorious knight that he can never chase away. and we can cement it in with b4 if we have to. Our rook is a monster. Our king has an easy way into the game or into this way. Things are great. And in fact, we're also threatening rook in here to win a pawn just like that. We have a dominating position. And the reason why is, again, back here, our bishop sucks. We were able to activate it. And at that point, our whole position made sense. Right? By castling, that gives black an important tempo where he's able to bring his rook over. Our knight isn't defended, so we can't move our rook, and we're forced to exchange it. And then in this position, our knight actually has no squares, and so we're forced to play c5, so that way now our knight has the escape to come out. And if our opponent had have taken it, and then something like this probably would have happened, more or less, the position's equal. Black has a fantastic knight. We have a pretty good knight too. Black's knight's probably better. However, black's pawn structure is more of a mess, right? He has two isolated pawns while our pawns are together. Neither rook's doing much, neither bishop's doing much, though our bishop's more active than before. It doesn't matter. This is an equal position, and the game probably would have ended as a draw here. Probably. Instead, black, I have no idea what black was thinking. He plays b5. I don't get it. He doesn't take a free pawn, and now we have a passed c pawn. And as soon as we can play b4, it's a protected passed pawn. And, like, I don't know. I have no idea how this happened. This is good, though, because this will lead us into the endgame portion in a moment. And so we played a3, which I like. We're getting ready to play b4 and get 3 solid pawns. He brings his knight in. We're forced to move our bishop back. King f8. Then we play b4, which I like. I like a lot. And we have a nice, solid advantage. And if we can find a way to exchange all the pieces, we basically win. That's the power of the protected passed pawn. If there are no pieces, black's king must stay nearby, because otherwise the pawn will just march. And that gives our king all the time in the world, you know, to walk over here, try to win these pawns, or to whittle over here and try and support the pawn. And that's going to be our eventual goal. That's our win condition, right? That is a very stable win. If we, like, back up, you know, before here, he takes the pawn, and we go into, you know, this position, there really isn't a win condition besides hoping our opponent blunders and we massively outplay him. Maybe we win both of these pawns, but of course that's not very realistic. As soon as he plays b5, and then we're able to lock this down, things are really good. Black plays g4. Sorry, he plays g5, which is actually interesting. At first I'm thinking this is the worst move in the world. But actually, instead of b4, we could have played f4, which is a really interesting move. With the idea that, of course, if he takes, all of a sudden this knight isn't very strong, and then all of a sudden our rook's got an open file, we're attacking this, there might be weaknesses against his king. If he doesn't take f4, right, he moves his king into the center, then after take, ooh, our rook is able to slide in. And that's very similar if you move back to g8. Our rook could slide in, or our knight could slide in, and then threaten e5. And again, in both cases, this knight is destabilized. The disadvantage is that, of course, this pawn now becomes weaker, and his bishop's going to come into the game as well. But f4 would have been an interesting idea. And if not now, then in the future. So black stops that. Notice that this now gives the f5 square to us, though. Ooh, things are nice. And then we play just a flat-out mistake. G4. You have to tell me, Raul, what is this? What? Why are we doing this? What is this move for? So just back up for a second here. And it's... Whew. The biggest mistake that amateur chess players do, I do this too, right? You can group me in here, is we make unnecessary pawn moves. Every move should have a purpose, and this is especially true with pawn moves. I do not see what g4 accomplishes. Like, are we worried that he's going to play g5 eventually? Or he's going to play the f-pawn forward? Like, I don't know. That's great. We want him to move pawns. The more pawns he moves, the more weaknesses he's creating. When we play g4, all of a sudden, this square is very weak. And notice how all these pawns are blocked. It's now, like, how do we attack this pawn? Like, that pawn's very weak. If we could attack it, how do we attack that? Like, this knight, okay, if we can get to d5, it'll attack, but how do you get to d5? It's not easy. This bishop can't attack it, it's on a dark square. E8 obviously is nonsensical. The king, the only way to get, for the king, we have to come all the way into here, and it's not even possible. There's no route for the king to go, right? Because, sorry, let me use black. Red? I know my colors, right? Notice how every way in is controlled by a black piece. This king can't come in currently. And also, we're stopping ourselves from ever playing g3, and then either h4, I'm not saying play g3 right now, but then we can prepare f4, opening the position up, now our rook is facing his king again, or we can play h4, opening things up. Okay, I can't put it on the board, and then we have a route in. It's just, as soon as we play g4, we lose all of that. And it's a move that does nothing. I don't understand it. And why did we play it? And also, if our pawn is on a square, then a piece cannot be on that square. Again, if we play g3, now, let me just delete these. Now our king, it could come in if we get rid of this knight, right? Our king has a way forward, you know, potentially. Yay, happiness. When you put the pawn on g4, the king has no way in. And this is how we lose, or we're probably not going to lose the game. This is how we get a draw game, because now the position is blocked and there's nothing we can do. Right? So this is the first mistake. Right? Often we play g4 because we think that we're being aggressive and we're being tactical, or we got to push pawns, or we don't know what to do. That's often the big thing. Right? If you don't know what to do, you probably shouldn't be pushing pawns. That's it. And the rest of our, okay, rook f2, then you bring your rook over. You could have done that without moving the g-pawn, right? So I don't see what this does. We simply threw away a temple to make our position worse. I'm going to stop harping on this, but this is really egregious, right? And again, you look through my games, look especially my old games, I have lots of unnecessary pawn moves, right? Like, it's an epidemic among amateur chess players, and it's something important to realize. If you don't know what to do, it's probably not make a pawn move, especially here in the endgame, where every tempo is important. Anyway, so we reach this position. And now, we have a good knight, he has a good knight. And I like what we do here, I really do, where you play knight f5, and then take, then we exchange rooks, reach this position, he plays bishop c6, bishop b3. And this, I believe, should be a winning endgame. Because even though our pawns, yes, we do have 3 of them on light squares, which restricts our bishop, it also restricts his bishop. And more importantly, our bishop is on the more active diagonal. It's excellent. Also, these pawns over here, let's see if I can color them. Excellent. They're on light squares. And so that means our bishop can attack them. Right? If all of his pawns ended up on dark squares, so if he were able to, reverse these pawns, something like that, and he puts this pawn here, this position becomes very, very drawish at that point, just because our bishop can't do anything. It's flying around, all the pawns are ghosts, we can't touch them. But because these pawns are on light squares, this bishop could attack it. And what happens is, let's look what happens in the game, actually. So, king, we move our bishop in even more, that's fine. We start bringing our king up, that's good. Then we play bishop h5. And I don't know why. Then we play h4. Take, take. And it's here where I realize that white doesn't know how to win this game. And we'll see that there's a bit of moving around. The king can't do anything because, again, black controls all these squares over here. And so they called it a draw. This was a draw. This almost certainly winning endgame was drawn. And it's not as if any one move was wrong. It's that white couldn't find the right plan. So let's back up. What is the right plan in this position? So again, it's an endgame. So when it's an endgame, our goal is eventually to queen a pawn. This pawn is a passed pawn. Perfect. So one of the most important things we want to think about is trying to push this pawn. Second, we want to ask ourselves, if a trade of pieces happened, who would benefit? Okay, sorry. Something like this. What happens if black allows... So first off, if black were to exchange, he could probably resign right now. There's now 2 passed pawns. There's no way he can stop that. This is almost trivial. If he doesn't, let's say he just, frick. Take. Again, this position is an easy win. In fact, they're both the same. Because what's going to happen is we're going to move our king up. He moves around, that's fine. We're going to move our king up. He moves around, right? We move our king up. And we're going to... You can see what I'm doing here. We're going to win this pawn, then we're going to win this pawn, and he can't do anything to stop it, because if he brings his king over, right, we just push the pawn, we win. He has to stay in the square of the pawn. And if he tries to do something like h5, it's not going to matter over here, right? It doesn't matter if he takes it or not. Take. Now we've got 2 pawns. Right? Yay, we got a queen. So this is a long-winded way of me saying that black cannot trade pieces. If he trades pieces, he might as well resign. And so every time that we offer an exchange, he would have to retreat. So that's the first thing we want to realize in this position. And so I liked what you did. You played bishop f7. He played h6. Why not? We moved our king in. Right here. So at this point, here's where we played bishop d5. And now black is left with a terrible choice. Again, if he takes, this might as well just be the same variation. We got these 2 pawns. Black has to stay close to them. In the meantime, we come in or we play this, and we're going to win the pawn. Or we're going to win stuff on the king side. So he can't take. But if he doesn't take, all right, he moves the bishop back. Well, now we could bring the bishop in. We're going to win another pawn. Just like that. There's nothing you can do to stop that. Extra pawns are always good. And then also, the plan of bringing the king in is also really powerful. Notice if this bishop ever leaves this diagonal, our king comes in 2 moves. Boom. And again, the more pawns that black loses, the closer he can resign. So, bishop d5, I think, is the winning way to go. That. Instead, we played bishop h5. All right? So, he attacked our bishop. Then this is here. And now this is, again, this bishop is simply in the way. Again, there's nothing over here to attack. And the only way our king can come in is through that square. And if our bishop's over here, it's not helping at all. So, really, our bishop needs to be on d5. Or even backing up, even just here on e6. It's the same thing. If this bishop, because now, actually, I guess we're threatening, wow, frig. Computers! Here, again, winning that pawn. So, that's nice. And again, we could even do something like this. And now his bishop is terrible. It can barely move. We could think about pushing the pawn. King comes over here. Again, we've pushed him to complete passivity. Our bishop dominates the board. His does nothing. We've got an easy plan. Life is good. bishop h5, king f8. Then we made our second mistake, is we played h4. And notice how a big part of the winning plan previously was getting our king in so we can start winning pawns. Specifically this pawn. This is the weakest pawn because it's so far away from everything else. When we play h4, then take, that pawn vanished. Right? So now this is the weak pawn. And see how it's much closer to this pawn? So this king is able to keep track of both sides of the board. Now this might still be a winning position for white, but I don't know. And it's certainly much harder. And then as we see in the game, we can't come in. We can't come in, so we have to do something different. So what we'd have to do is, it's really awkward, because our bishop has no moves now, is we would need to spend several moves. Trying to get our bishop back onto one of these diagonals. So it'll take like 85 moves. And then with the bishop somewhere over here, we could think about trying to get our, let's maybe use a different color. Why does it disappear like that? I don't know. And then we could try to get the king in this way. That would be the plan. And as you can see, it's going to take a lot more tempi, and it's much, much harder. Black can offer more resistance, right? Because as we're moving our bishop around, maybe black's bishop, what's yellow? Aha, yellow. It could slink in and start harassing pawns, right? And again, a king on e7 protects everything. Again, I don't know enough about endgames to find out if this is winning. The computer is no help at all. It says every position is 1.77. That's great. Thanks, Stockfish. That's not the point. The point is, backing up, is that we made several mistakes that went from what I believe to be a fairly easy win, or at the very least a win, to something that's much harder, maybe impossible. Okay, so there's quite a bit that happened in this game, and I touched on several different things, and I'll put a quick list here in my after editing. So that'll hopefully show everything. But if I had to take like one main takeaway or one main thing to focus on, it would be pawn moves, and in particular unnecessary pawn moves. And I said it, if you don't know what to do, you probably shouldn't push a pawn, because you can never take it back, and then you could you could spoil something you don't even realize. Because again, this endgame here, it'd be so much easier, right? Imagine we had this pawn back here on the G pawn. Maybe I can set that up. Okay, so imagine it was something like this, right? All of a sudden, this is no problem at all, right? Okay, it's going to take us a little bit, right? But the king can come in this way, the bishop can come in here. I know this isn't the exact position, but this square all of a sudden is available to us. Because we can put our king, we can put our pieces on it. Also, if we don't like how blocked everything is, it's black to move apparently, whatever. We can play g3, we can then think about playing f4, right? And after all the exchanges, okay, we're going to win the pawn back. Now, it's much easier to attack this pawn. It's hard for him to defend, because again, we also have this. We have options all of a sudden that we didn't have before, right? When we move pawns, especially if we don't know what we're doing, or we haven't really thought it through, it can lead to bad things. Or it's not so much that it leads to bad things, is that it takes away other possibilities, which might be better. And if we don't know, probably don't push pawns. Okay, so that's that. Hopefully you found that helpful, Raul. Hopefully everyone else found it helpful as well. Again, comments, feedback, criticism, anything you want to say, that'd be great. Try to make these the best videos I can. If you have questions, comments, concerns, again, I guess I just said that. Leave it. Happy to hear it. If you have games you want me to analyze, like Raul has done for the last month or so, that'd be great. Send them to me on my blog or in the comments or on chess.com. And I'll see what I can do for another week or so. Otherwise, I think that's it. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.